The forest was silent, but in the dead of night, something stirred. Something that would change everything. A sick bear, left for dead, was about to face a force beyond nature's cruelty. The forest was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The air was thick, dense, and the only sound was the labored breathing of a massive bear, slumped against a tree, its once powerful body now weak and trembling. The ropes that bound him to the trunk cut deep into his fur, a reminder of his helplessness. His eyes, once fierce and filled with the fire of survival, were now dull, his body sinking into exhaustion. The wolves were closing in, their golden eyes burning like embers in the moonlight. They circled him with calculated movements, taunting him with every step. But they didn't attack. Not yet. Something was off, a strange tension in the air. The wolves were hesitant, their instincts telling them that this wasn't just any prey. The night felt different. Even in his weakened state, the bear could feel it. The fear that gripped his chest wasn't just from the wolves. It was something deeper, something primal, an ancient warning that he couldn't quite understand. Something watched from the darkness, and the forest seemed to wait for it to reveal itself. The pack's leader, a large gray wolf with a scar across his snout, growled lowly, his eyes scanning the shadows that seemed to thicken around them. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to lead the pack away from this ominous presence. But his hunger, his thirst for dominance, and the scent of the injured bear clouded his judgment. The wolves shuffled uneasily, their once confident stances now faltering. Their eyes darted nervously toward the distant rustling in the underbrush. The air felt charged, unnaturally so. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The bear, despite its wounds, could sense it too. Its ragged breathing became more erratic as it struggled to raise its head. The primal fear within it flickered. It knew that there was something more dangerous than the wolves lurking in the forest, something unknown but ancient. Its remaining strength was focused not on fighting the wolves, but on survival. There was no choice but to hold on, to endure whatever the night had in store. The pack hesitated. The leader's muscles tensed as he fought against his own instincts, urging himself to push forward. But the eerie sensation in the air grew stronger. One by one, the wolves looked over their shoulders, sensing the same fear, but unable to place its source. Something far larger than themselves was out there in the darkness. The moment stretched out, a tense standoff between the wolves and the unseen force in the forest. Their instincts screamed at them to flee, but they couldn't pull away. The sick bear lay in front of them, ripe for the taking. Yet the threat that loomed in the shadows paralyzed them with dread. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, the earth seemed to shift, and a loud, earth-shattering growl erupted from the trees. It was deeper, far more resonant than anything the wolves had heard before. The sound echoed across the forest, sending a ripple of fear through the pack. Without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. The wolves turned in unison, eyes wide in disbelief as a massive, shadowy figure emerged from the underbrush, a creature of immense size and power, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It was no ordinary animal, and the pack, realizing the true danger of the situation, knew immediately that their prey was no longer the bear. It was them. As the wolves faltered, a chilling silence filled the air. The rustling that had once seemed distant now grew impossibly loud, as though the entire forest was being shaken by the presence of something much larger than any of them. The trees creaked ominously, their branches shaking as if in fear. The wolves' ears pricked, their senses now on high alert. From the darkness of the forest emerged a massive shadow, a figure so large it seemed to distort the very air around it. The wolves recoiled, the primal fear flooding their instincts. This wasn't just a predator. This was something other. Something they were not prepared for. The creature's amber eyes glowed, piercing the night with an unnatural intensity. Its fur was dark as the void, almost blending into the shadows that surrounded it. Its massive body was draped in an unsettling stillness, yet its sheer presence caused the ground beneath to feel as though it trembled with every slow, deliberate step it took. There was nothing natural about it. No animal had this much power, this much weight in the world. Its muscles rippled beneath its thick coat, every movement measured and deliberate. The wolves, once the hunters, now found themselves the hunted. They instinctively backed away, their tails lowered, hackles raised in fear. The scent of the predator hung in the air like death itself. The smaller wolves scattered first, their legs carrying them into the trees, seeking refuge in the dark corners of the forest. They knew they stood no chance against this towering beast. The alpha, however, stood his ground. His fur bristled as he growled, attempting to make himself appear larger, his bared teeth catching the faintest moonlight. But the creature merely tilted its head, an eerie, almost knowing gaze meeting the wolf's eyes. Without warning, the predator lunged with a speed that defied its massive frame, swiping its paw across the alpha's chest with devastating force. The alpha was thrown backward, crashing into the ground with such power that the earth seemed to tremble beneath him. The alpha struggled to regain his footing, but the creature remained unfazed, its amber eyes never leaving the bear. But what was truly baffling was that the predator didn't immediately go for the bear. Instead, it circled it, as though studying the injured animal with an intelligence beyond that of any creature in the forest. It crouched low, its eyes flicking back and forth, not with the hunger of a mere predator, but with something more calculating, more purposeful. The bear lay trembling, its mind swirling with confusion and fear, trying to comprehend whether this towering creature would finish what the wolves had started. Was this new predator a threat to the bear? Or had it come for the wolves instead? The bear's breathing grew shallow as it realized that its battle for survival had just taken a far more dangerous turn. The wolves were no longer the true enemy in this forest. It was the predator that watched them all from the shadows. And it was waiting. The bear lay there, trembling beneath the weight of the predator's gaze. Every instinct told it to run, to escape the predator's watchful eyes, but its body betrayed it. Weak, injured, and disoriented, it couldn't move fast enough, its mind swirling with confusion. The predator didn't approach to finish the job, though. Instead, with a slow, deliberate motion, the creature reached out and extended one massive paw. The claws, sharp as knives, scraped the air with a soft hiss as they reached for the ropes that held the bear captive. The creature's amber eyes glowed with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through the bear, reading its every movement. It tore through the ropes with ease, snapping them apart as though they were mere threads. The bear blinked in disbelief. Its mind couldn't process what was happening. Was this creature offering help? Why? The ropes fell away, and the bear was freed, but it only felt more confused than ever. A mix of fear and wariness surged through its weakened body. The predator didn't advance. Instead, it remained still, watching the bear carefully as though waiting for something. But the moment the bear could move, it instinctively tried to flee, pushing itself up with all the strength it could muster. The creature didn't stop the bear, it merely followed, its silent steps echoing like a shadow. Every movement was slow and measured, and yet, it seemed to be with the bear every step of the way. The tension in the air grew thick. Was the predator a threat? Had it merely released the bear to lead it into a trap? Or was it something else entirely, something the bear couldn't understand? Each time the bear faltered, the predator's presence loomed behind it, always a few steps away. It felt like a chase, yet there was no aggression in the creature's movements. The bear's pulse quickened. The question lingered heavily in the air. Was this an act of mercy? Or was it the calm before the storm? The silence that had hung in the air now broke with the unmistakable growl of the wolves. They had regrouped, their hunger for vengeance sharper than before, their eyes gleaming with the desire to finish what they had started. The pack, led by their alpha, circled once more, their movements synchronized as they closed in on the bear and the predator. But this time, the predator stood tall beside the bear, its massive form an imposing wall of muscle and power. It was clear that it wasn't simply observing anymore. It was here to protect. The tension escalated as the wolves sensed a shift in the power dynamic. They hesitated, uncertain, but only for a moment. With a snap of its jaws, the alpha led the charge, leaping toward the bear with deadly precision. But before the wolves could reach their target, the predator moved, faster than the eye could follow. In one fluid motion, it swung its claws, striking the first wolf with the force of a storm. The wolf yelped, its body sent flying through the air, crumpling to the ground in a heap. The other wolves, momentarily thrown off balance by the predator's sheer strength, lunged forward, but the creature moved as though it were one with the night. No hesitation, no mercy. A wolf that leapt to its right was knocked sideways with a single swipe, its body crumpling under the weight of the blow. Another met the ground with a sickening crack, unable to rise as its packmates backed away in terror. The battle was swift and brutal, the predator dismantling the pack with terrifying ease. Its movements were a blur of speed and power, each strike landing with deadly precision, sending wolves tumbling one after another. Amidst the chaos, the bear, still weak but fueled by its instincts, joined the fray. Its massive paws lashed out, swiping at the wolves that dared to approach. Though its body trembled with exhaustion, the bear fought back with a ferocity that surprised even itself. It struck with the force of a mountain, and though its strength was fading, the wolves hesitated as they felt the weight of its power. The alpha wolf, seeing its pack in disarray, backed off, growling low in its throat. It was no longer the leader of the hunt, but a desperate survivor. With one last attempt to strike, it lunged at the predator, teeth bared, but the creature moved with such agility that it avoided the attack. In a final, brutal exchange, the alpha was sent sprawling backward, retreating into the darkness, its pack scattered and defeated, and just like that, the battle was over. The air fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the bear and the predator. The wolves had been vanquished, their blood staining the ground, leaving the bear and the creature standing victorious. The predator, its amber eyes never leaving the bear, lowered its head slightly, as though offering a silent acknowledgement of their shared survival. The bond between them, unspoken but undeniably formed, was solidified in that fleeting moment. The battle was over, but the air was still thick with tension. The predator didn't leave the bear's side. Despite the blood staining its coat and the deep marks of the fight on its body, it remained, its amber eyes never straying from the bear. There was no rush to move on, no indication that the creature intended to abandon its unexpected companion. Instead, it stood silently, a quiet sentinel, its presence offering a strange comfort amidst the chaos of the forest. The bear, still battered and weak, could feel its wounds aching, but it also felt something else, a shift, a quiet understanding between it and the predator. They had both survived against the odds, against the wolves' hunger and the brutality of the wild. The bear's labored breathing slowed, its muscles still trembling, but no longer as frantic. The primal fear that had gripped it during the fight began to ebb away, replaced by a strange gratitude for the creature that had saved it. The forest around them, once eerily silent, began to come alive again. The chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves filled the air, signaling that life was returning to the woods. Yet, there was still a strange tension that hung in the atmosphere, an unspoken bond between two survivors who had been tested in the fires of battle. Slowly, the bear began to rise, its legs unsteady at first, but growing stronger with each cautious step. The predator moved beside it, its silent strides perfectly synchronized with the bear's. They walked side by side, neither leading nor following. It was not just a truce, it was a partnership, forged in the heat of survival and solidified by the bond they shared. There was no need for words. The forest, in all its chaotic beauty, had become a place of quiet understanding between them. The predator's presence was a constant reminder that in this wild world, sometimes strength and survival came from the most unexpected alliances. The wolves had not retreated for long. Hidden in the shadows of the forest, their eyes glinted with hunger, and their pack instincts drove them to regroup. They circled, a low growl rising in the back of their throats, their previous defeat burning like a wound that needed to be healed. They weren't finished, they wanted vengeance. But this time, things were different. The predator, unshaken and unafraid, stood beside the bear. Its stance was unwavering, its muscles rippling as it stood at the ready. The bear, though still weakened, had regained a sense of its own strength. The bond between them was no longer just an understanding, it had solidified into a partnership that would not be broken. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as the wolves prepared to strike once more. With a coordinated howl, the wolves lunged forward, launching their attack with renewed ferocity. The alpha led the charge, teeth bared, its eyes locked on the bear. But this time, the bear was not the helpless prey. It swiped at the first wolf, its powerful claws cutting deep into its side, sending it tumbling to the ground with a yelp. The predator moved like lightning, its immense body twisting and striking with deadly precision. It snapped its jaws around one of the wolves, throwing it aside with terrifying strength. Another wolf lunged at the predator, but it was swatted away effortlessly, its body crashing into the trees. The predator and the bear were a seamless force, two predators working as one, a deadly dance of survival. One by one, the wolves fell. Their pack tactics, once so effective, now seemed clumsy and ineffective against this united front. The alpha, witnessing the power and coordination between the bear and the predator, hesitated. It circled, growling, but there was doubt in its movements. The tide had shifted. After a tense standoff, the alpha lowered its head, a reluctant acknowledgement of defeat. With one last defiant growl, it retreated into the shadows, the remaining wolves following suit. The forest for the moment was quiet again. The bear and the predator stood together, their sides heaving with exhaustion, but their eyes fierce. They had emerged victorious, not as enemies, but as equals, survivors of the wild's brutal trials, partners in the unspoken law of the hunt. They were no longer just creatures of instinct, but a bond forged in the fires of battle. Together they had proven that even the wildest of forces could be tamed by unity. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the forest was still, silent, but no longer the oppressive, fearful silence of the night. The battle was over, and with it, the tension that had gripped the land. The bear and the predator, side by side, walked away from the remnants of the fight, their steps slow but purposeful. They moved together, a quiet understanding between them, each one now a part of the other's world. The bear, once a solitary creature, now felt the weight of protection, a sense of companionship it had never known. It was no longer simply surviving, it was living, truly living, in a world where its survival wasn't a lonely struggle. It felt the predator's presence beside it, not as a threat, but as an ally, one who had fought for its life, just as it had fought for its own. The forest around them seemed to acknowledge this new balance, the quiet now a respectful one, not born of fear, but of recognition. The predator, once a solitary hunter, had found an equal. Together, they had rewritten the laws of the wild, a partnership forged not through words, but through action. And as they walked through the forest, their journey was just beginning. A new chapter had opened, one where survival was no longer a solitary battle path, but a shared strength between two unlikely allies.